Hello, I'm Catherine Ambrose, and this is part of a web series, a companion to the Empowered Senior Series in Wichita, Kansas at Botanica, and the Empowering Seniors television show on Channel 8. PBS, KPTS is our local affiliate. I met Dr. Mark Kolkman through an online mastermind, and some of what he had to share really resonated with me, so I thought that you would enjoy hearing some from him. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining me this morning for a little visit.
Oh, you're welcome, Catherine. I've been looking forward to it from the time that we connected, and to think that I might have a little bit of subject matter expertise that could contribute to your audience and your viewers in Wichita is pretty humbling. So it's with gratitude that I say thank you, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're excited to hear from you. I know you have things that will be meaningful to someone watching. And I was intrigued with your Back to Better Facebook group that you've started. Tell us what that's about.
Well, I think that anytime you're getting back to something, it means you've been somewhere previously, and there's been maybe an aspirational goal to return. So over the course of my nearly 30-year career, I've had the opportunity to be a public educator, a leader, a school administrator, work in full-time ministry and other nonprofit events and businesses. And I think that the common theme of educating, equipping, and empowering people is such a universal theme. And I know that that's a large part of what you center your work and the contribution that you make through the Empowering Seniors series. And so the Back to Better Facebook group is really a countercultural movement to what I think we're all experiencing coming out of the pandemic and COVID-19. Here in my community, I saw other similar Facebook groups popping up, and was just somewhat depressed at the dialogue and the sarcasm and really the criticism that community members were levying towards our politicians, our office holders, and other decision makers around how to come out of the restrictions that really are what kept the impact of COVID as low as it has been. So we're thankful for that, but there seemed to be so much criticism that people were forgetting, in my opinion, the positives that came out of the isolation and opportunities that people had to think about someone else, to think about their own self-improvement, and all of those things that I think were the human interest stories that came out of the nightly news. And it was with that I wanted to build a community movement that focused on serving others and not forgetting that getting back to business wasn't just about prosperity in the commerce. It's really about prosperity in community. And that's what Back to Better is all about.
Mm-hmm. And serving others, when you're focused on serving other people, how does that benefit you?
Well, I think it's always been a longstanding research-based notion that when you're thinking of something besides your own current condition, that you think of others, it helps shift your mindset. I think of the story that Jim Collins wrote about in his book, Good to Great, around Admiral Stockdale, who was imprisoned in the Hanoi Hilton. And when interviewed and asked how he made it through that, he said it was because they had some thought or some thinking about the conditions other than themselves, right? Here are prisoners of war who were tortured for 4 or 5 years, who made it not because they were positive or encouraging, but because they confronted the brutal reality of what they were in and decided that one thing was going to make the difference in their life. And someday when they got out, they'd never trade that for anything, because it redefined who they were. Mm-hmm. And I think that thinking about other people and contributing to the health and well-being and prosperity of our neighbors gets us to think about something other than our own suffering and helping others. And that at every age, it seems like we teach that in kindergarten and we celebrate it then, but it tends to wear off over time
Mhm.
And getting back to better together is an effort to remind all the adults in our community what our children so readily know.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about legacy, and that legacy is more than just money or things that you leave behind. Legacy is what you're building every day and what you are contributing to people's healthy mindset and to their future, and what you're putting in their hearts. And people can really make a difference for others just by reaching out and saying something kind. And then in return, it really does make a difference in how you feel. So I think Back to Better is way beyond just opening up businesses in your city, and has so much to do with how to deal with adversity. And I was talking to a senior the other day, and she said that life may never be the same, and I thought that was interesting. I heard that from a few seniors. And one thing in particular that she said was she feels so bad for people struggling with their businesses and their employment, and for kids missing out on proms and graduation. And she said, life is not fair. And the sooner we learn that, the better off we are. And so she was hopeful that even though this could be really sad for the kids in particular missing out on certain celebrations, that it might help them as they go through life. So I thought that was insightful.
I couldn't agree more. I think if we apply the perspective of the Stockdale paradox as Collins wrote it, if all of us who have been through, and I won't say it in the future tense, right? Because I think we're already making progress to get through the COVID pandemic. If we look at that at the defining moments of our life, for which we wouldn't trade anything once we get completely on the other side of it,
Right.
and leverage it for the creativity that it is, and has been able to provide for so many, it really diminishes that kind of self-pity and missing out.
Yeah.
In my past career, I was a high school teacher and administrator. And so I'm in community now and well connected with so many high school educators and administrators. And as I've been talking to them, each of their schools are doing extraordinary things to create a relatively adequate facsimile of prom and graduation and all the ceremonial things that students so well deserve and are rites of passage. So I think if folks look at that they get to experience something far different. They will be a member of a unique cohort for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
And it's not a deficit. It's something that will set this generation of seniors in high school and senior citizens and every one of us that have lived through it. It will set us apart and be a differentiator that I think makes us all that better if we've used it as such.
Absolutely. And how extraordinary that they see people really pulling together to give them the best that they can towards a celebration.
That's right.
Yeah. And you're so right that sometimes it really does take getting completely on the other side of adversity. I've had probably the two most challenging things in my life. Going through it, it just seemed like the end of the world. And I was 15 and 16 years old during the first thing that I went through, and I wouldn't trade that. You're right. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It made my life so much better. And the best parts of my life now are because of that. And then during the Great Recession, I really got knocked down. I got steamrolled in business. And I did have a big self-pity party for myself for a long time. I did a lot of reflecting and thinking, and talked to coaches, talked to different people. And I knew from everything that I'd been through in business training and all the leadership training that I went to, that successful people rebound. And I thought, where's my rebound? It just wasn't happening. And I just had to believe that there was a reason why I was struggling with it. And I just did the best I could to work through it and find other things. And then it led me to this mission for seniors and for adult children of seniors and caregivers. And I wouldn't trade what I've been through because it prepared me for today. And I knew I was going through all that for a reason, but I couldn't imagine what it was. And it took 11 years to get to the new place. So, which
Well,
Mhm.
I've heard it said that in life, you can't connect the dots looking forward, right? So
Right.
even when we're in the middle of the battle or the trial or the trauma, we have to have not only a positive mental attitude, but we have to have something outside of ourselves that we know is a source of greater strength. For many, that's our faith, but I think you can also find that in many other ways, and many people do. But adding serving others, irrespective of where your current condition is so important, right? That idea that even in the middle of the battle, I can contribute to someone else is extraordinarily empowering. And I know that's one of your components, and a message that I would just encourage all of your viewers, irrespective of their age or stage in life, contributing what they can in that moment based on the expertise that they have of just being a unique individual human being is of value to somebody else.
Right. And staying curious, being curious about people, being curious about ideas. I think that helps deliver opportunities and open up new doors. And that's something that has always worked for me. And it just makes life more fun to stay in curiosity rather than being in judgment. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what you were talking about with the other Facebook groups that you've noticed, where they're very judgmental and kind of keyboard warriors. And if we can stay on the side of hope and faith in our neighbors and faith in humanity and faith in a future, hope in a future, that really makes all the difference.
It does.
So,
I think, as you and I have talked a little bit coming into this, I think there's a stage where the dialogue and the discourse goes in only one direction, that the loudest voices sometimes are not interested in leading for the sake of others, and that the wrong people actually have the pen, and so many people then read what they're writing. The wrong people have the microphone, and they're the loudest voices that people hear. And I think your effort there in Wichita and mine here in Naperville are really trying to combat that, and so that the right people with the right messages of education, empowerment, and contributing to others, that we have the microphone too, and we are as able to speak those messages and build that community involvement as anybody else. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to come on and help support you there, and to be a part of that, because I think that being a lifelong learner is a tagline that I've heard for so long in education. But I think it's more than that. You have to almost have a lust for learning and growing beyond the expectation of your current comfort zone. At least in my life, and I would expect for so many others, nothing magic happened within my comfort zone. It was always someplace outside of that, where I had to stretch and grow and hurt and sweat. And sometimes the hurt came unexpectedly and I didn't invite it. And sometimes the pain came from physical change and transformation because of an exercise regimen or a diet. But the end of those things, the pain that comes leads to gain with the right attitude. And I think that the encouragement that I would give everyone that sees and hears this message is to continue to find ways to learn, continue to find ways to contribute, because being a contributor is the conduit to help other people tap into something you may already know about. So sometimes the knowledge that we have and the way that we help the most is to, I think most of the times, counselors counsel from where they needed counseling once in their life. Teachers teach the way they were best taught. Coaches coach where they needed the most coaching themselves. And I think that's the same of so many of us that are trying to add value to others and be a positive influence in the communities that we live and have so much to be grateful for, whether that's Wichita or Naperville. There's a lot of value that's happening around here that was established well before we came along, and now it's our season to contribute and make that even better.
Yeah, I actually lived in Naperville for just about a year, and it was one of my favorite places. So I know you live in a beautiful community. I want to talk about your PIES acronym. So
Sure.
PIES, PIES. So that's appealing on many levels. But if you could explain what that means.
Well, it's an acronym that's I think most people, baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet, right? The
Mhm.
American dream. PIES is an acronym for the physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual components that make up all of us. And as I've encountered community groups and other accountability groups over my recent years, the best transformation in my own life personally came when I was involved with a committed group of individuals who were taking time for each other to slow down and be really, really intentional about caring about those four things for themselves and for their families. But then this broader group of individuals who made up our little small group in our learning community. And so to be able to have others, maybe it's couples, maybe it's individuals, and it's men kind of being with men in community and small groups, and women with community groups that are, iron sharpens iron, and people that are holding each other accountable with care and love make everybody better. And so when we have an opportunity to have a regular check-in and a progress monitoring around, hey, how's your physical health? That makes people generally want to be truthful and say, I've stuck to my diet regimen, I've worked out, or I haven't, and I can need some encouragement there. But also the intellectual and learning. What about the last week or 2 weeks, depending on the cadence of the check-in, has been positive about your intellectual engagement? Have you learned something new? What's the book you're reading? What's the content knowledge source you're taking online? Irrespective of your industry, you can take an online course very easily that helps you learn something new and keeps the active part of your brain engaged and learning, and that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
So too is emotional health, and we talk about EQ being so important, that people know how to engage in an emotionally healthy way in our relationships, particularly with our spouses. That's important. It's also important to model for our children. But then in business, I think it's been a lost art to understand and be able to admit how emotions and emotional health and having a high EQ can leverage or destroy somebody's business or their vocational career if they're not particularly emotionally healthy at any given state. And then the final quadrant there, the final slice of PIES, is S for spiritual. And that's not to be confused with religious. So this can be an ecumenical discussion of any type, but it's really knowing that there is a component of our life that has to be connected to a higher power and a source of energy and hope and love outside of what we can provide for ourselves as humans, or even rely on another human being who's imperfect to contribute for us. So it's important to have all four of those components weighing in and prioritized in your calendar. Balance in all those areas is important. And we found, and I've seen personally, that it's much more beneficial to be doing that in a community group that is encouraging one another and kind of living life together, knowing what the struggles are and knowing where the high points come and celebrating those together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're made to commune. We're made to connect with one. We're meant to connect with each other and to share and learn and grow together. And
Absolutely.
think about grandchildren and great grandchildren, even the impact that grandparents can have on the whole entire rest of their life. And I think that acronym is a really cool thing, maybe even to talk with your grandchildren about. And sometimes we're in a state of counterbalance. If you're really dealing with something physical, then you might not feel balance in some of the other areas. And, then there's a time in life when you can focus a little more on different aspects. So I think that we talk a lot about balance, and it's really a counterbalance and just an
It is.
awareness. Yeah.
Um, I know we all kind of experience seasons of growth, personal growth at different times, but I think we experience the weather and the changes of season similarly. So I think this will resonate in your neck of the woods also. Spring has sprung here in the Chicagoland area. The sun is out. Rain has come, through the month of April, and now those April showers have begun to spring forth the May flowers. And here's what I know. I took the time several weeks ago to dump a bag of fertilizer on my yard. And with the rain and the sunshine, guess what happened? I now have to mow my grass twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
So it reminds me that sometimes there are growing seasons where you have to do twice the work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm no longer shoveling snow, but because it's not the winter season, but I'm mowing the grass twice a week now just to keep up, and my focus has shifted. So I think the same is true with the PIES acronym. There might be a season of life where you've just so neglected your health that it takes twice the work in that next season in your physical quadrant to make the gain that you want to gain.
Mm-hmm.
Alternatively, you may have ignored your emotional or spiritual health. And then when the time comes that you make the decision to engage that, it takes twice the work because you're so far behind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those are seasonal. And I know that when I have help, whether it's from a coach or a community group, it's better, right? This past Saturday, I had some help with my grass. My teenage son now knows how to use the lawnmower because he's ready and he's of that age. So it's even though there's twice the work, I don't have to do it all myself because I've got a partner who is also accountable for that and motivated. In this case, my son, because he has some privileges around the house that might be retracted if he doesn't contribute. But I think the metaphor and analogy there are universal, that we can expect not everything to be balanced. It has to be a trade-off and a counterbalance, as you suggested, and that we know that there can be an end in sight when we put in the work.
Yeah.
Make progress in those areas.
Well, what great life lessons you're passing on to your son, and wonderful memories you're creating. So, and time flies. We all know that.
I hope so.
I want to share something that you share with your coaching clients, and that is the what's best next concept. That really caught my attention.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. I mean, I think that's especially when there's overwhelm involved, right? And I think we all see that in our lives. And I guess I should set that up by saying, why is it that any human being would expect to be in such complete control of anything in life, let alone multiple factors or change or transition or unexpected things, that we wouldn't at some point be overwhelmed?
Yeah. And COVID taught us we are not in control of anything, or it can change immediately.
I don't know about you, but I was endowed by my creator with only about 8 pounds of gray matter. And that's enough to keep me my heart pumping involuntarily and a few other things. But I can't control a whole lot of the rest of the stuff that goes on in life, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I can own that, kind of as Stockdale would have said, that's the brutal reality. You are you, and you are not God, so you can't control everything. It makes it a little easier to ask for help, or even be in a receiving position for help. So the idea of overwhelm, whenever you encounter somebody, and I know you a number of times encounter families or seniors that are overwhelmed with downsizing. They need to transition out of their homestead, you know, that lifelong residence that they've had, and the variables that come with insurance and Medicaid and all the things. It can be very, very overwhelming.
Huge.
But it's great to know that there's things like your program and your empowering series that will help. Asking the question, what's best next, is a way to snap someone's focus away from all of the things that they don't control and really focus on one priority and one tangible next step. And knowing that the other ones are there to then prioritize and make progress on. But when you're stymied by inaction because there's so much, that's just a cycle you never break unless you're really deliberate about that, right? So the encouragement I would have for whether that's personal transformation in any of the pie quadrants, or whether that's a family that's seeking to help their parents make great choices for the next season of life, just asking the question. And it's oftentimes, and I would say the most time, it's best to have that conversation with somebody who's not in the storm with you, right? Who is maybe a content expert or a counselor or a coach or someone who's equipped to help with a strategy once you've made that decision.
And they're not tied into that whole emotional situation that you're involved in. Get some outside perspective.
Correct.
Yeah, very good. So what's best next? It's just very calming that you don't have to think about everything. You just need to think about one thing, and just taking action on one thing can help you feel so much better. Gary Keller, you know, I started Keller Williams Realty in Wichita, Kansas, and Gary Keller says that if you don't have focus, it's hard to move forward. If you're thinking about all of these different things, what do you not have? You don't have focus. Focus is one thing. And he wrote an excellent book called The One Thing. And a lot of people, and that's for the general public, and a lot of people really praise that book. And he has a similar question, a focusing question. And that is, what is the one thing that I could do right now that would make everything else unnecessary? And that's another good one too. So, you know, and that's more of the big picture one. I see yours as being kind of calming and focusing, just to get you in movement. So it's excellent. Excellent.
So the people that I'm in community with, if we're having that conversation, it always comes with a quick, there's a tandem or a sidecar to that question as well. And that is, what are you going to do about it? So the book I like to refer to is The 4 Disciplines of Execution, or 4DX, by Chris McChesney. It talks about having big, hairy, audacious goals and wigs that are wildly audacious kind of goals that are time bound, right? Yeah. And that have specific action steps to measure against. So the analogy I use there is that when I was a football coach, the overarching goal, the wildly audacious and big nugget that every football coach wants to do, is have a successful win. And we know that those are measured by wins and losses. So winning more than you lose is a really good thing. Well, if that's the only goal, if there's no process to get to that, then by the time I measure a win or a loss, it's on a Friday night, about 10:30 at night. There's 0 on the time clock, and it's either you win or you lose, right? It's done. By the time you measure it, the activity is over. Right. So it's the same in life, right? If I'm trying to make gains physically, intellectually, emotionally, or spiritually, or to avoid overwhelm, or to downsize my estate and make a transition into senior living, you have to have some action steps. What are so it's called the lead measures. What are those daily targets that we can measure against? If we have 30 days to get something done, and we have a series of lead measures, I can end every night putting my head on the pillow feeling really good that I've done 2 or 3 of those lead measures that are going to make the likelihood that I win a football game, that I sell my house, that I transition from one stage of life successfully to the other. I know I've made progress, and it's not just win or lose that we measure, it's progress that we measure that gives us the likelihood to have the successful result we want.
That's excellent. And that reminds me too, that you told me that football coaches don't lose games, they just run out of time.
That's right. I just needed a couple extra minutes. So, that's an old football analogy, or coach's slogan. But I think that's true of all of life too. And one that I hope would be a central theme for the seniors that are watching this show, that if you're still active and you still have the ball and you still got a team around you, let's just have one more play, right? Let's just run one more Hail Mary pass and try to get it in the end zone. And if the clock runs out, then the clock runs out. But at least you gave it everything you had in every opportunity. And I know that that's a clear message for every age and stage of life. There shouldn't be any stage where we say, we're just not trying. We got the ball, but we're not trying anymore. That just doesn't work.
Yeah. And running out of time, you do want to know that you did give it your best. You're so right. So.
And that you spoke earlier of the legacy, right? So that's what classes of student athletes that come behind remember of one particular team. Mm-hmm. That's what generations of families remember about their elders. That's what community members remember about other contributing members of the community. Oftentimes, it's not the name that goes on the facade of the building downtown in our communities that people remember. In fact, sometimes those people are forgotten about, and you wonder, well, who is that? Why is their name on the building?
Yeah.
That are remembered, the legacies, are people who serve, who went out of their way, who were gracious and did things. I hate to use the phrase random acts of kindness, because I think those of us that are intentional mm-hmm. about being kind, that's the legacy that I want the people that I'm in community with my children, with my family. I don't want it to be random, because random you never know when it's going to come. Yeah. But when it's intentional and people know that that's a consistent part of who you are as a person, of who your family is, and quite honestly, my vision would be for our communities, when people think of Naperville or Wichita or any community in between, mm-hmm. they know that's a generous and gracious and kind place to live and raise a family and age with dignity, because there's systems in place to help, and there's systems in place to lift up and guide people towards those goals.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Intentional. That's something that we talk about a lot in business, is being intentional, but we can apply that towards our personal lives, and just like you said, just generosity and our legacy that we're building, being intentional. And so I'm going to shift gears for something I'd like to touch on. We were talking about the tale of two grandmas, that sometimes there's a grandma that's really interested in learning technology and another that's not. And when it comes to technology, we'd really encourage adult kids to keep encouraging your parents and other people in your family and people just out there in general to embrace technology, because there's so much connection that can take place if they just even have just the simplest ability to engage in tech. And it's not just about them, but also about them leaving a legacy for grandkids and great grandkids, that she kept learning through her whole life, or she decided to learn how to use the smartphone because she wanted to see me on video. And
right.
So talk a little bit about that. You came up with a tech savvy granny. I love that.
Well, that's one of the things that that comes easy for me when we start talking about a concept. It's probably just because I'm such a simple-minded person that I can't remember a big long clinical definition. I have to come up with an acronym or something catchy. But a tech-savvy granny, I think, is something that in my mind, when I think of that, it's certainly not pejorative. I think it's something that's very complimentary. And I appreciate you asking about this.
My
It
office
might.
mate's getting loud. Just a second. Hey, Randy. Sorry, I was hoping you wasn't getting too loud to where they couldn't hear your message. So, um,
Worries.
okay.
Now, I was just going to say I might get choked up when I talk about this because we recently said goodbye after a long duration to my dad, and he wasn't the most tech savvy guy, but a year or so ago when my oldest son turned 13, so many walks of life and faith traditions have something really significant for young people when they cross that threshold into adulthood, however that community or culture defines it. And and there wasn't really anything like that in my own background, and certainly nothing that my family did. But I read a book and heard some people talking about this idea of a ceremonial transition from 12 years old to 13. And so we put that together at a time when my dad was still able to be with us, and he was intellectually and cognitively able to. And I just held the camera, the video, and he talked for about 5 or 10 minutes. And it was extraordinary to go back to that now, in the time that we've been grieving his loss, and know that there was a message there that lives on, right? It was an oral history, if you will, of stories that he had from when he was in fifth grade and had to take fifth grade twice. My dad passed away at 89, and he would talk about having to take fifth grade twice, like it just happened yesterday.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. But the takeaway there is that something as simple as our cell phone, our smartphone, whether it's in my hands as a family member or in the tech savvy granny's hands, just recording a message or watching a message or getting online with Zoom or FaceTime shows that younger, and it's going to skip a generation, right? I'm really talking about how grandparents influence their grandchildren or great grandchildren.
Yeah.
Because technology is so ubiquitous with the younger ages, right? It is. They were born with a device in their hands almost. So to see their grandparent and hear their grandparent is not unnatural for the younger generation. And it's extraordinarily significant because that lives on. And anytime my family wants to see my dad or hear his voice of encouragement and hope, we just hit play and we watch it all over again. So I would encourage those within your network of that could be a great project for a series of volunteers to get together and say, who can we go around and just record a little bit of their story? Because most of the time there's a story inside of everybody.
Oh, for
and
sure.
the worst thing in the world is for someone's story to end without having had the chance to tell it.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Find a way to do it. That's my advice.
Yeah. Very good. That's very good. I wanted to share one thing about legacy too. I have a friend in the healthcare industry that was inspired by her aunt that she spent a lot of time with when she had really significant dementia. And her aunt was just going through her day and her struggles, but she had her little niece with her, and the niece gained a lot from that time. And so we're capable of making an impact on someone without even realizing it. And so I just would encourage people just to be open to really communicating and spending more time with family the best that they can. And if we're quarantining, technology is going to be the way to do that. So I'm so grateful for everyone that is using technology and learning to embrace it. And I just want to encourage everyone to keep encouraging everyone to get involved in technology, and don't be scared. People are way too scared about, the boogeyman and passwords.
Well, we had an opportunity in the last month to engage my mom in a similar way. She is doing well. She's in her middle 80s and living on her own and adjusting to a new season in life for herself, right? Even though my dad had spent a number of years in an assisted care facility and my mom lived on her own, she was still a caregiver and had that obligation after having been married for over 50 years that she visited my dad every day and did a number of things to care for him in a dignified way. But she had never had a smartphone and is on Facebook and emails all the time. And my brother and I convinced her that, if you're on Facebook, there's a thing called Messenger that has an audio camera component, and you can do Zoom or Skype-like calls without a smartphone, right from your camera on your computer. And with a little bit of help, we were able to do that. And now she's connecting. In fact, I refuse to talk to her on the phone. I say, Mom, if you're going to get a hold of me, I have my phone with me all the time, no matter what. So Facebook message me through the video. I want to see you every time we talk. And begrudgingly, she's been doing that, but it's just been wonderful. I mean, what a better way for those of us who are isolated from our aging parents to progress monitor and keep track of them. It's one thing to talk, and I think we should be talking to our parents every week and several times a week and every day if we can. But to be able to see them in their environment and see what's going on with them is one way that we can check in and do that well-being check and intervene if we have to, because it's all too easy for somebody to say, I'm fine, I'm doing okay. And if their voice sounds fine, we're convinced of it.
Yeah.
When we see them, it's a whole different affect, and it can be an early intervention if it's necessary. And I think that's just something we should all think about.
Mark, that is brilliant, because we talk about that all the time, that people will talk to their parents on an ongoing basis on the phone and not realize until they get together at the Memorial Day picnic or Thanksgiving or Christmas that something very significant is happening in terms of decline. And so you're so right, that can be a good early intervention. And it works back with your kids too. Like if you really want to know how your kids are doing, if you are engaging in video, you're going to get a lot more out of it.
Yeah. Really. Well, and people, there are oftentimes, coronavirus notwithstanding, that our aging parents and elders in our lives are shut in because of their inability to be mobile, or maybe they can't drive any longer. So they're pretty isolated in typical times. And it dawned on me that, when I saw my mom one time not wearing her glasses, I would never have known that if I was talking to her only on the phone. I had to see her face to face to be able to ask, Mom, where are your glasses? Oh, well, the nose piece fell off, or I got to get it adjusted, and I didn't get a chance to do that. Well, oftentimes people don't want to be a burden, and they don't want to ask, and they know their children are busy, and they've got kids that are doing the school activities, and they just don't share with you what's really going on. I think it's so important that we see them like that, and it just kind of prompts us to action, that I knew my mom needed some help that she otherwise would not have confessed or even made me aware of, and I was able to help with something as easy as that. But then things that are far more significant can come up as well.
Yeah, I think you've really touched on something important. I'll be sharing that with a lot of people, Mark. That was really a great idea.
Welcome.
Well, Mark, this has been a great conversation, and I'll look forward to visiting with you again in the future. And I'm going to be very interested in hearing what our viewers have to say and what they've gained from this. And
Yes.
how can they reach you if they would like to visit with you more?
Great. Several ways. They can visit my website, markkolkman.com, very easily there, and find contact information or information about some of the ideas and programs and content that I've mentioned specifically. They can find us on Facebook with the Back to Better Facebook group that exists. And I'd encourage anybody that comes along that. It's not simply Naperville centric, although that's kind of where it's launching. I would encourage people right there in Wichita to begin a Back to Better Wichita Facebook group and begin to build a community effort to take back the microphone. That yes, we don't want to squelch the voice of getting back to business in all of our communities coming out of coronavirus, but we do also not want to lose this goodwill and the message of hope and prosperity combined, that serving and adding value to others can't be lost. It shouldn't be something that we're always reminded to get back to in crisis. We should sustain it moving forward. So check out my website, markkolkman.com. Some information there also about my upcoming book called Flex, the 21 Ways to Lead Yourself and Others Through Trauma, Transition, and Termination. So all those things will be readily available at markkolkman.com.
Very good. I'll be contacting you when I need some ideas on how to name things. So, all right.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And if you have any questions or topics that you'd like to suggest to me, you can reach me on any threads that you might see this on YouTube or through my website, empoweredsenior.org. Mark, have a fantastic day, and good luck with everything you're working on, and we'll talk again soon.
Great. Looking forward to it, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you.